TODCast podcast, episode 4. We're already into episode 4 of our podcast. We've been enjoying the journey so far, having great conversations and learning about different aspects of San Francisco. In this podcast, we talk about everything community development and SF, San Francisco. Um, we have an exciting guest for this episode. I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Peter, my co-host, to introduce her and get this podcast rolling.
Thank you, Andres. Let's get this TODCast rolling. So what we're going to be talking about today is a very important, huge issue that I think a lot of people in San Francisco might not be aware of. The Lurie administration is currently proposing a massive upzoning proposal that basically covers all of San Francisco. There are a lot of concerns in it. He does call it the family zoning plan, but I think there are some questions about whether or not it really is family oriented. I think today we're going to be mostly discussing the small business portion of that plan. We have here with us today Christin Evans, who is on the steering committee of an organization called Small Business Forward that has currently been doing a lot of outreach to get the word out about this plan and also working with the city to make this plan more small business friendly. So Christin, could you take it away? Tell us a little bit about yourself and what is Small Business Forward?
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, so I'm a owner of two small businesses in the Haight-Ashbury, Booksmith and Alembic. And for many years, I've worked in small business advocacy through our merchant association. And I have always felt a little bit of frustration that we didn't have like a really focused progressive advocacy orientation to our work. And so knowing that there were like-minded small business owners across the city that would want to participate in a small business advocacy organization that is really focused on doing kind of some strategic things to improve the sustainability and vitality of our small businesses in San Francisco. In 2023, I helped to co-found the organization. We now have over 300 small business workers and owners that are part of our organization. We have a steering committee that provides input on our policy positions. And I'm happy to be here today to talk to you about upzoning and how it could impact our small businesses.
Thanks. I mean, it sounds like y'all found it at just the right time. So that's great. Yeah, let's just dive right in. Could you tell us a little bit about this plan and some of the concerns you may have with it?
Yeah, so, we've heard from small businesses in the Mission and other parts of the city where upzoning has already started to take place over the last many years. It's not uncommon when you're going into the parts of city where there's new construction and new housing going up that you'll see a lot of vacancies at that storefront level. And I think our concern really is that the current proposal that really focuses on the west side of the city with established neighborhood commercial districts, there's not a ton of empty parking lots to build on. So what that means is this is a plan to really target those single story and maybe there's one unit of housing above type buildings and put up maybe 6 and 8 stories and above. In some areas, they're also even saying 14 stories and above to put in housing. That would be great because we all know as small business owners and workers how difficult our housing crisis is right now. We have an affordable housing crisis. Most small business workers make between $30,000 and $80,000 a year, and the for-profit market really hasn't met their needs in terms of the new units of housing that are coming online that are so expensive, $2,000 and $3,000 a month for a tiny studio spot even, right? So what we have been advocating for is housing that's actually affordable to small business workers. And our concern is that the mayor's plan doesn't have that affordability in it. And it's putting a target on small businesses for displacement and possible demolition of those buildings for housing that will be largely unaffordable to small business workers.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I think something that we talk about here, specifically in the community development model and development, is the importance of the financing of these projects, right? And how that really impacts what gets developed and how. And I think that something that we've talked about a little previously that's very interesting, and I'd love for you to elaborate a bit on it right now, is kind of when a developer is building a new development, kind of what considerations do they take in regarding the commercial space and, potentially loans around it, or just how do they think about that commercial space when they're financing a new development?
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, developers come in lots of shapes and sizes, but what we're seeing pretty consistently in the areas where there has been already this new housing development, where there's vacancies at the bottom level, a lot of those developers are actually not from San Francisco. They're from out of town. They are in the business of creating apartment buildings that, the buildings some often look like they could be in any other city in the country. And they really aren't targeting to have local small businesses that really, provide the culture of our neighborhood commercial districts, and enrich our communities by having like those unique businesses and personalities that are community serving. And so what we're seeing is that a lot of these developers, the commercial spaces are just really an afterthought. They are required to put them in because of the zoning constraints on them. And what we're even hearing from realtors is that the rents that they're asking for are just completely out of whack with market conditions. And the reason for that is because when they're going through the process of getting their loans to put these buildings up, they're putting a price on what they think they can get in rent at those commercial storefront level, what those retail shops could pay. And they're putting in inflated levels above market rent. And they're basically doing that to make the financing work for the project. And then they're just essentially leaving those spaces largely vacant. We found a project when we started to survey this that's been around for more than 20 years, and it has 10 storefront vacancies, some of which have never been rented ever.
20
But we
years.
found 20 years, and
Wow.
that was the most egregious example. But pretty common to find buildings that have been up for 10 years or so and have storefront vacancies still, including
Great.
what's called a cold shell. Cold shell being like there's nothing in the space other than like a cement slab, and you could even see pipes in the ceiling and things like that. So no lighting, no HVAC, no plumbing, no electrical. So these can be really expensive spaces to actually try to move into. They're not move-in ready for small business. It would take upwards of some people have said $500 to $1,000 per square foot to outfit a space for a restaurant or a cafe. So that we're talking like hundreds of thousands of dollars to make those spaces workable.
Wow. Is that what happened to the jug shop? I know that they negotiated a deal to be moved into a space and then they were supposed to come back. I'm not totally familiar with what happened. My understanding was part of the issue was that they would have needed to make those improvements. Like they were getting a cold shell when they moved back in, and that was part of the problem they had. Don't quote me on that. I don't know if you know more, but
I haven't talked to the owner, but I read the same media reports I think you did that basically detailed that exact problem. Anecdotally, we have a building here in the Haight-Ashbury that is just gone up at 730 Stanyon, and that space at the storefront level the spaces at the storefront level have been for lease for more than a year. They actually, before the space is even ready to move in, they're advertising the opportunity to move into the space. And I'm talking to the developer for their restaurant space. They only had one applicant that was interested in coming in that could afford the tenant improvements that would be necessary to operate a restaurant in that space. So it's tough, right?
It's a lot of doom and gloom. Let's pivot to maybe some solutions or some positivity here. What are you all asking for? How do you think we can, make these improvements to, the proposed legislation that's happening? And just what's the general movement? Who's doing what? Who's trying to make this, I guess, plan a little bit better for small businesses?
Yeah, so the Planning Commission held a hearing in April at the urging of Rep Coalition's urging to focus on small businesses and have a specific moment on the agenda to talk about what is needed for the small business community. The planning department estimated that about 40 to 50 small businesses would be displaced per year over like the next 10 years. That would be about 400 to 500 businesses. So it's not an insignificant number of businesses that would be displaced. Probably most likely initially through just higher rents and through a non-renewal of their lease, or pushing them to a month-to-month kind of lease situation, that basically gives them no protection. So it really makes it hard for them to make any investments in their business, because they won't be able to recoup those investments over time, right? And so because we know that so many businesses would be in the position where they would have to relocate out of their space, the question then becomes, where would they relocate to? And the good thing is that we've actually had a commercial vacancy tax that's really encouraged landlords to bring rents down, and we've really filled in a lot of our vacancies in our neighborhood commercial districts. That's not true citywide, because not every part of the city is impacted by the commercial vacancy tax. Just the neighborhood commercial districts are. So, in some cases, there won't be appropriate spaces within the community that are available for lease for people to actually take over. But let's say there is a perfect space that they can move into in the community. It's still going to cost a lot of money to move. And for a retail shop like mine, we moved our bookstore in 2021. It cost about $150,000 in total to relocate the store. For a restaurant, it probably would be much more. $500,000 is not unrealistic, is what I'm hearing for from the Golden Gate Restaurant Association. So that would be true for bars, restaurants, and cafes. They would have even bigger outlay of money to try to relocate and stay. So what you're probably going to have is a situation where you're going to see a lot of retirements. You're going to have a lot of people just going out of business or moving out of the community altogether. Small business workers would be losing their jobs. So, like, we're asking the city, and in this hearing at Planning Commission, we said, like, we need some meaningful protections for the small businesses to be able to stay and remain. And so we asked for things like the ability for right to return, right of refusal around coming into the space, right? And they are saying, the city is saying that that's not possible because of some state law complications. And
yeah,
a lot of those,
there's no commercial rent control, right? That's something's preempted by the state.
that's exactly
Okay.
right. So whereas a residential tenant that might be facing displacement might get a buyout, a payment, the city is saying that they can't mandate a landowner to provide a similar payout to the business. So that's interesting, because there was a state bonus housing measure called AB 2011 that did actually provide those relocation payments that were commensurate with the length of time a commercial tenant had been in the space. So for example, a business that had been in a space for 20 years or more, contributing to the carrying cost of that building, probably, the insurance costs and the maintenance and the upkeep of that building for 20 years, they would be entitled to about 18 months of payment of their rent as a lump sum to help with their relocation. So, that's the ideal scenario that we're looking for. And then it would, it would be a sliding scale from that. So, like, if you've been in the space for 5 years, you get a little less, and so on. But the idea is to basically have some kind of meaningful assistance to try to retain our small businesses in our neighborhood commercial corridors.
Excellent. I mean, that sounds good to me. I know that we have some of our supervisors working on a few pieces of legislation as well, right? I think Supervisor Melgar and Supervisor Chan. If I have it correct, Supervisor Melgar is working on some sort of a fund to help small businesses move. Can you fill us in a little bit on the details there?
Yeah. So initially, she made a request to the budget and legislative analyst to analyze what other cities did, and there was a lot of focus not just on the businesses being displaced, but the businesses that would also be negatively impacted from construction. Because if you're not a business that's being displaced, but you're located right next to where a housing site will be going in, with construction over a couple of years period, you're likely, and you're locked into a lease, you're, likely to see a decrease in your foot traffic, and that's really going to harm your business, right? Because you're not getting a cut on your rent because all of a sudden there's a new building going in. You're going to have to still pay the same rent, but your sales are going to be impacted because of, the challenges that come with construction projects, right? Like loss of parking, foot traffic declines if people are walking on the other side of the street or around the project to avoid the construction, the dust, the noise, all of the things, right, that can really harm a business. You won't want to go get your massage and have your relaxing treatment right in a space
With the jackhammer next to it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or, date night, don't want that, to be what you're looking out the window at or whatever. So, whatever it is.
Yeah.
I think the the Melgar's legislation sought to create some kind of set aside fund. The Office of Small Business does that already for small businesses, typically grants up to $10,000 that might help with like so a business can improve its storefront or signage or repair a window or something along those lines. They're talking about doing some kind of mitigation funds for those that are impacted by the demolition and displacement. And it's tricky, right? Because it would be then in her proposal coming from the general fund. It would be asking, I think in her scheme, gross receipts taxpayers that are, getting more than 5 million in sales, like these big companies, would have to check a box that would get them to allocate a portion of their gross receipts tax to a fund, that then those funds would be available. So, there has to be a mechanism to get the funds allocated to this particular purpose. And that's what her proposed legislation. I think there's details to be worked out there about how that mechanics of that will actually work.
Okay, so it's kind of a voluntary thing that we're sort of hoping. Gotcha.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then is it Supervisor Chan is doing some sort of like first right to purchase, kind of like a Copa Topa? Do you have any thoughts
I
on that?
believe so. Yeah. So the Chan's legislation hasn't been introduced yet, but it's been in the press. So the outlines of which seem to be around the idea of providing workers or businesses an opportunity to purchase the building, or in the case of workers, purchase the business potentially. If they wanted, if maybe the owner doesn't want to make the move and relocate, but the workers are interested in continuing the business, it would maybe give an opportunity for the workers to continue the business maybe in a different location. So that's part of Supervisor Chan's proposal. She also has a separate piece of legislation that she's introduced to continue the protections that Aaron Peskin put in a year ago to try to slow down the displacement of legacy businesses. Legacy businesses are a very small percentage of the overall total businesses in San Francisco, but they have to have been in business for 30 years or more, or in business for 20 years or more, and at risk for displacement. And they go through an application process and they get added to a registry. So those businesses in particular could potentially see some limited protection in the form of if they're displaced, that the property owner has to go through a CU process, a conditional use hearing, to replace them.
And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, this was in response to a billionaire named Neil Mehta purchasing up a block in the Fillmore and was attempting, and I think succeeded in evicting Tenichi, and then Lamed was the other business that was in trouble.
These are like long-term restaurants that have been in the Fillmore for like 40 years. And, one wealthy guy buying up a bunch of storefronts, evicting and displacing them, for the most part, leaving them empty, which is very frustrating. But Tenichi in particular was a sushi bar that closed. They were not in a position to continue to stay there, and Similarly, the La Mediterranee, they were being offered, short-term, basically lease extensions. Like I think they're, in that situation still. So very much at risk of being displaced permanently.
Okay, thanks. I think we've gone through quite a lot here right now. Just the one last thing I want to bring up is I think we had some good news potentially at the Small Business Commission on Monday. Could you talk a bit about your efforts and what happened?
So there is an advisory body that's actually majority of the positions are appointed by the mayor. So it tends to be a very friendly to the mayor kind of commission, and it doesn't really have any teeth because it's advisory. But they took an important step to continue the item. They were being asked to provide their recommendation of support in favor of the mayor's upzoning plan, and several of the commissioners voiced some pretty big concerns that this plan that's been in development for years really has neglected to address the small business displacement aspect of it. And they're very concerned that this will lead to the closure of many businesses. And so they, instead of taking a position, they postponed to, which is what we asked them to do, to their next meeting. So August 25th, we're going to turn out at the Small Business Commission hearing and have public comment and ask them to take a position in favor of specific measures that that the mayor's office could implement to make this plan better, to if not protect small businesses entirely from being displaced, to at least have them have a fighting chance to remain in the community.
That's great. So what's that? August 25th. I believe it starts at 4:30 in room 400. Am I correct? So
That's right.
hopefully, hopefully anyone listening to this that feels inspired will come out and support our small business community. I think we're kind of getting to the end of our time. Is there anything else that you want to bring up or that we missed that you'd like to cover with us?
No, I thank you for the time. I just wanted to emphasize that, Small Business Forward is in support of affordable housing and trying to really make sure that, any housing plan that we do have, especially if it's going to displace small businesses, it has to have a significant portion of affordability in it. I believe that, some 80% of our housing goal is to build affordable units, and 80% needs to be affordable. And so, with a plan that basically says that there's going to be only 15% affordability, it just really doesn't get us to the end goal of really having a robust inventory of affordable housing units that our small business workers and our community members can live in.
Yeah, as they say, the math doesn't math, right?
No.
So thank you so much for coming, Kristen. Something we generally like to say here, especially in the community development world, right, is land use, zoning, and planning are really a reflection of our values as a city. So this plan that the city is currently creating, we just want to make sure it reflects the city's love for small businesses, the support for the workers, of course, affordable housing. So just kind of keeping that in mind. Thank you for everything you've done. We really appreciate having you on, and hopefully you'll come on again.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks. Bye.
Yeah, thank you, Kristen, for joining the podcast today. It was very informative. I really enjoyed having you on. We really enjoyed having you on. And I just want to thank everyone for tuning in. And I want to ask everybody to please share the episode, contact your city officials, and help us make sure that small businesses are protected in the face of massive change. And we'll see you guys next time, episode 5 of the TODCast podcast.